I'll need 3 hands here. Hello, great. In the conversation that I had over there, I heard so much about community projects, church halls, the Roman wall, the history of Edinburgh. Fantastic. Just in a few moments, and it just shows how broad the conversation can be when everybody's included. So we've got a short period of time. I'll give you a little bit of background about Deep. Hands up if you've heard of Deep. Wow, that's great, and it's fantastic to see so much interest here. I think, to quote a conversation I had with Agnes this morning over breakfast, today represents, as many events do, but this one particular represents a very special collaboration, which we shouldn't take for granted. I think this is a very special thing that's happening, where people with experience of dementia are able to contribute as equals to the debate about how we as a society live with and deal with what we call dementia. So thank you for that. And this is the potential. The voice of experience really does shift paradigms and really does create change. And we're becoming used to saying that the narrative itself is a form of evidence that supports change. And Agnes may have time to speak a little bit about one or two of the projects that we're involved in, actually leading research from the voice of experience. So, welcome to you all from Deep. It's not very clear that, but that's, I'll talk a little bit about the gatherings we had in Scotland last year, which were wonderfully funded by the Life Changes Trust and been very, very productive, and some of the priorities that came out of those gatherings. The gatherings are led by people who live with dementia. That's us. Deep is a network, it's not an organisation. So Deep lives within a small organisation called Innovations in Dementia, of which Philly, my colleague, is the director, and I am an employee. And I coordinate the north of the Northern Hemisphere, and that one's me. This is Rachel, and Rachel coordinates the south. So my patch, as it's sometimes referred to, goes from Derby, which is a bit of a loop, into the south, up to Shetland and across, and includes Northern Ireland as well. And Rachel coordinates the Deep network in Wales and the south of England. So we're truly facilitators and coordinators. We're not managers, because the Deep network is a network of individuals and groups. We're funded by Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Comic Relief, and the Life Changes Trust, and we run until in this incarnation until the end of September 2019. So we'll be putting the hat round. That's great, because it helps us to evaluate and see what needs to happen next and how we take it forward. As I say, it's a UK network, and it connects people across the UK. There are over 90 groups now in the UK, 16, possibly becoming 18 in Scotland, which is a great step forward. There were 2 a year and a half ago when I came into post. I was really attracted to it. It's a great privilege to work with this, within this network. It's so positive. It introduces concepts such as hopefulness, human rights, really high on the agenda, the rights of people with dementia to the same services and the same standards and the same community inclusion as all the rest of us, as everybody else, no different. And the concept of recovery is coming into the network as well. The qualification for joining the Deep network is that the group should be led by the voice of experience of dementia, of living with dementia and the diagnosis of dementia, and should seek to influence something. So it can be your very local, it can be your church hall, or it can be the World Health Organization definition of dementia, and anything in between. And groups work independently themselves, or they work in partnerships with other Deep groups, or indeed with other organisations. So there are no particular barriers about what a group can do. But to distinguish ourselves from a support organisation or a care provider, etc., those are the simple criteria that the groups are led by the voice of experience of dementia and are seeking to influence something of importance. Getting involved in influencing attitudes, etc., etc. But the concept of recovery is an interesting one. see some puzzled faces whenever I say that, but often a diagnosis of dementia from a person's experience is led by a prognosis of loss. Loss of self, loss of mind, loss of life, loss of autonomy, loss of freedom, loss of community, loss of relationships, loss of a driving license, loss of the ability to get out and about. When we're talking about recovery, people are talking about recovery of self, recovery of identity, recovery of hope, recovery of the future. So bringing a very hopeful dynamic is a very important part of DEEP. It's not something that we ask people to consider. It's what people with dementia, given the opportunity to speak, introduce it to the debate, and hopefully helps to shift a few paradigms. This is something that a lady said when we were planning our gatherings. I'm sorry, I can't. We asked people with dementia to come together to help us plan our gatherings last year. And a lady from Central Scotland came along. She said she'd never been to a planning meeting before, but at the end of the meeting she said she just thought that what we should be aware of is things should be clear and tidy, and that if everyone's kind to each other, then it will work out. And that's just stuck in my mind, because it's actually much more complex than it looks, but it's very astute. And for me, it's a really good example of the insight of somebody who's lived with dementia about how things could work. For a while we said, well, that could actually replace the Scottish dementia strategy. I'll just say as well, we've got Dementia Diaries, which is in its second phase now and has been taken on by Innovations in Dementia and DEEP. And it's very easy to Google and find Dementia Diaries. Yep. Fantastic resource. People can phone in a message, leave it on Dementia Diaries. You have to sign up to be a diarist, and anybody can access those messages. Really, really useful. You can get home after a busy day out. I mean, Agnes can talk about it, no doubt, and correct me if I'm wrong as well, or anybody else that's done it. We had a little play with it yesterday at the DEEP group here about using it. So people get home and say, oh, it's so annoying, I went to this meeting and nobody would let me speak. I'm absolutely fed up, I've got it off my chest now. Right, I'm going to go and feed the cat. Fantastic, but other people can share it. The thing is, we don't always have to share it face to face. We can share our experience in a whole number of ways, and Dementia Diaries is a really fantastic addition to the resources that are available through DEEP. Anybody wants to sign up, see our helper.
I'll demonstrate it over lunch if anybody wants to see on my laptop. So,
Yeah.
One thing just to make clear, it is not a helpline.
No.
It is not a helpline, but what we, the people with dementia, find it is very therapeutic to, especially if like we live alone and you've nobody to speak what happened to you. Just sharing that, you know, they say a trouble share, a happiness share, you know, so we've had all sorts of fun things. And now the Dementia Diaries, a lot of researchers and professionals in universities, they're looking at the diaries because it's giving them a great insight.
Yeah.
And then they contact DEEP and see, would we like to get involved in their personal project?
Yeah, and it's a fantastic resource for those of us that work in the field as well, because it's hard work, it's inspiring work, it's always uplifting, but sometimes you just have a bit of a struggle on how you're going to say something. You go into Dementia Diaries and you'll find the evidence is right there before you of the experience of living with dementia in a whole set of context. Approaching 40 diarists now, is that right?
yeah, growing every week.
Yeah. That's right.
6 new ones from Northern Ireland last week,
Yeah.
which is wonderful.
Brilliant. Well, that'll bring it over 40, won't it?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to put a few comments up from people that illustrate the voice of experience. It's important to get the correct diagnosis. Dementia is not enough. There are many kinds of dementia which can benefit from different medications or treatments. The doctor wouldn't just say, you've got cancer and send you away and see you in 6 months' time. But people, until recently, have largely reported that kind of experience. So we have the right, one of the first times that people started mentioning rights in the DEEP network, to more specific information. Because information, as we know, is power and gives us control. Talking about pathways that are designed for people, clinical pathways. And somebody that's in this room, I'm taking a quote from her, I tried to cross the bridge of self-management between the 5 pillars and the 8 pillars, and it collapsed. It's not there, there's nothing there. So that's the voice of experience as against the policy-led design of the pathway that people living with dementia should go along. Yeah? And so it's that balance of the narrative and the prescriptive. Without a self-directed support toolkit, we're being done to, and we're not in control of our lives. So the sense of control and the ability to recover your life, outmaneuver your dementia. There's another quote that's very useful sometimes. I've learned how to outmaneuver my dementia. They put a new roundabout in the road. I used to drive straight along it, now I have to drive around it. That kind of self-management. So we had 3 gatherings in Scotland last year. We had one in Hawick, there, one in Inverness, there, and a larger one in Edinburgh. Some of the comments that came from those were, I want to see a world which accepts dementia. Living with dementia is a journey. You find new ways to use your brain and learn to outmaneuver dementia. The downside of dementia is mainly loneliness. You can find community in all sorts of places, not just in dementia services. That's a really interesting comment, I think, that the downside is actually being isolated and on your own. I put a handout on the table. It wasn't quite enough to go around for everybody. Some more comments there. Very important relationships as well. But I put a handout, and I'm going to read some of the priorities out. I didn't have time to put them on this presentation, I'm afraid. There are some handouts on the table, and these are the priorities that came from the 3 gatherings. We have the right to get out and about. Again, a really simple statement, but it involves so much, and it's led to so much work within the DEEP network, and it's informed work done by Andy, who's here, yeah, as well, from Upstream and other projects. And it really underpins our right to live in our community and connect with our community in all sorts of ways. The interesting word there is our right to get out and about. We want to work to reduce stigma. We want to improve the experience of being given a diagnosis. We want to address issues of bullying and intimidation within our communities. We want to help develop support right through the whole of the dementia journey. And a lot of it will be peer support. We want to use technology, creativity, community and gatherings to reduce isolation and loneliness. We have the right to be supported to live independently in our community. And that statement actually has led to the development of some quite sophisticated, should we say, user-led research projects about managing one's own life and condition. We have the right to do normal things, the things that we want to do. We support the use of cultural and creative opportunities to help people with dementia speak, whatever their circumstances. So extending all those creative opportunities into more deprived environments or care environments where people have more difficulty speaking. Agnes.
No, I'm sorry. We keep talking about community, and I was thinking about the loneliness and isolation that I came across in care homes, and that is a community, but it tends to be a closed community, and I would like to throw out here today to remember to include the community of care homes. And I know that when we had a wee introduction, there was someone at our table from education, and I spoke about intergenerational work, and I know the Netherlands are good at this, involving in primary school, preschool children and getting them together. This is what we used to do years ago when your granny used to look after your granny and your neighbour, and everybody looked after the kids. And you just thought people, like Agnes's granny, she was a bit bizarre and strange. They didn't use dementia, and they were so accepting. And I would like to see it at that grassroots level, where we go back to the old Celtic way, where we're accepting of where people are in society, and just use what we've got. You know, most grannies nowadays are out working, and if they're not working, they're now looking after children because the families have to work. So we need to work with what we've got and just make it fun.
Yeah, thank you, Agnes. And thinking again around creative opportunities and some work in care homes and hospital wards, we have some deep groups, particularly up in the Western Isles, that are doing fantastic work with creative opportunities for people. Hand memory, weaving skills, old objects, taking them to places where, and I've visited these places with Paula in Lewis, where we've been told, oh, somebody they haven't spoken for 10 years.
Yeah.
Within 5 minutes, they're playing a folk song and doing some handwork, people are talking. So using those opportunities, other ways of giving people a voice. And from the deep perspective, it's not about necessarily delivering a therapy, it's about finding ways to give people a voice so people can contribute. Okay. We want support to keep our key relationships healthy. And in that term, we're all care partners. So raising the language of care partnerships amongst people, as opposed to the more traditional carer and person receiving care, is also something that may shift the paradigm a little. You wanted to say something?
No.
No, sorry, the lady next to you. That's it, you've got your hand up though. Sorry, I thought you were. Okay, my apologies.
She was blowing a noise.
Oh, my apologies. Okay. Yeah, so the importance of keeping relationships healthy, because a lot of us in this room will know that when we're caring for somebody that we love, or when we're being cared for by somebody that we love, whether it's our mum, or our son, or our partner, or our husband, or our wife, that can change the relationship, and expectations get made. So from the gatherings, that call for how do we keep our relationships healthy? Where's the support for that? So I've done some work with the British Psychological Society and Sue with EdPop, looking at how psychology can play a role, how services can play a role, and that one of the sensations people have is if they have dementia, you're excluded from some services, not social services, but excluded from some services. So if you have a problem with the post-traumatic stress disorder of receiving a diagnosis, the shock of it, the change to relationships, what support is there? What support is out there to help us with those circumstances? Yeah, so that's something that we're also trying to take forward through DEEP. We want to receive and develop clear, accessible and understandable information about all aspects of the dementias. We live in a different age now, as was said earlier. We're an internet age. We're an open community, we're an accessible community. We've all got rights, and we have a right to information. People with dementia have a right to accessible information about their condition. People with dementia can lead research. We're not just research subjects. I think that's a really important point as well, because that narrative, that voice of experience informs change. You could argue always has been across all social change. We've seen it with learning disability, physical disability, mental health, etc., other issues. It's fantastic to be involved in the change that's led by the voice of people living with dementia. I'm sorry if I'm rushing a little bit, but we've got half the time that we thought we'd have originally, so that's absolutely fine. Yeah, so the diagnostic and prognostic evidence may say that things are getting worse when you go and see your doctor, but the narrative of the person's experience may say that things are getting better. And that's underpinned by the quote on the previous slide when Maria went to rebuild her life after cancer and a stroke, and got involved in a deep group, entered an open university course, moved house to a more accessible thing, went to a doctor and said, oops, I'm having a great time. And he said, you do understand, Maria, you're never going to get better. And so she said, why did he say that to me? He didn't need to tell me that. And that's where the line, join us in our journey of hopefulness, come from. So she sort of rejected that doctor's advice and moved on and started giving that as a talk to medical professionals. So one person can make an enormous difference. Obviously, people living with dementia can contribute and help to change the world for everybody in the future. So yesterday, there are some people in the room, we held a deep meeting. Unfortunately, I had to go to a funeral and was late arriving at the meeting, so I took some photographs and joined the meeting late in the day. So that's us, and some of those wonderful people are here today and can contribute. And I don't know, would anybody like to say what that meeting felt like?
A couple of times I got a bit emotional yesterday. Having the opportunity to listen to other people, to recognise and understand what was being said. But the most important thing was there was a strong sense of moving forward, not sitting in a corner accepting things. Forgive me, it's a bit emotional. But recognising in the faces and in the voices of the people that were sitting around that table that there was a determination to make life go on. There are a number of things that have been said today already that are enormously encouraging. And it's encouraging me to be a bit more positive and to recognise that there are two partners here, myself and my carer. I didn't expect to be doing this for it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ted. That's a brilliant summary.
Yes, and it wasn't just the people with dementia. What was really wonderful was, sometimes when you get a diagnosis of dementia, you cling on to the person who's the nearest to you. It could be a daughter, a lover, who knows? We don't know who it is, but you do cling. And that clinging can cause relationship issues. And then the care provider or care partner, they then get a role that they didn't really sign up for. They're not trained to do, and yet everyone expects you to pick up that role. And if you don't do it, my daughter was one that done it for me. So if she was here today, people would be saying, "You're in that room, you should be with your mum." As if suddenly Agnes had lost the voice. And this was what it was. But, sometimes they wish. Sometimes they wish. But then what happens is, slowly, I noticed my daughter taking up and believing what was being said. And I watched a shift where I heard this, "Where are you going? Do you want me to come with you?" Can you see the shift and that was through peer support coming from media, coming from well-meaning, uneducated communities, expecting too much from a human relationship. And that is why I think it's so important yesterday that very quickly we had our introductions and we split up, and thanks to Life Changes Trust, the carers could go into their room and bitch and do and laugh. I found that carers tend to bitch, right? If you see the people with dementia, they tend to laugh, So I think it's really funny, and it was great to see. There was laughter, there was tears, there was lots of all sorts of snorters and everything. And at the end of it, we had a wee cup of tea, and you heard Ted. Fantastic work, So this is only the second part of it, The first part, the main part for me was yesterday.
Great, absolutely. I think nearly running out of time, but no, it's all right. No, it's okay. We've got 3 sheets on the wall there where we took notes from yesterday's meeting, which summarise some of the discussions that we had. I've also managed to copy them onto here this morning as well, So, etc. We've talked a lot, as it always happens, about transport. Transport is always an issue. Every area seems to have a different transport system. And we reflected, you remember we talked yesterday about transport? How it's easy for some people, how it's really difficult for others, how transport can make people feel they need to move because it's not easy to get around an area. How do we build on the capital that we have in the community to say, well, there's those empty buses, there's community transport there are all sorts of taxi card schemes that can be reintroduced to introduce that. It's a big blow when you have your driving licence taken off you, when you've been, especially in a rural area. It's a huge blow to an individual. I've met people who had the licence taken off them by the GP when he's told somebody they have dementia. They've had to catch a taxi home and that changes lives. So there are all kinds of fantastic ideas. And you can be perfectly safe in your known local area. So there are all sorts of restricted licences are coming up now, aren't there, for young people, and when you can drive and what distance you can drive. So is there a way of exploring that if it's okay to drive into Haddington, because you've been doing it for 40 years, could you not have your licence to do that? Could there not be a tracker on a car, for example, that would say, oh, you can't go any further? Yep, they've managed to do it with supermarket trolleys, don't they? Can't get them out of the yard, can't get them in the canal anymore easily. Not that I've tried. Smaller places need to be on bus routes, for example. Is there anything anybody would like to say yesterday about how hard it can be to live in an isolated area, how wonderful it is when you move by the sea, but suddenly when something changes, it becomes really difficult, doesn't it?
Can I ask you?
Yes?
We are actually going to move because of the isolated area we live in. Ted, unfortunately, is desperate always to be out in the community and mixing with people. I'm okay, I can sit there all day and not bother.
Yeah.
But because of that, we are going to move this year
Okay.
into an area where, and we were talking to other carers and dementia patients, where he can walk out, maybe meet somebody, say hello, buy a newspaper, go to a little cafe and
Be
sit.
normal.
Yeah,
Yes,
be normal.
be normal.
Exactly. So you don't have to catch that special bus.
Yeah.
You kind of, yeah, absolutely. Whereas on the other hand, I've met with groups in Sheffield, and a group of men were saying how fantastic it was not to drive anymore. You can get the bus, you can talk to whoever you want, you can go to the pub, you can go home when you like, you don't have to worry about getting stuck at traffic lights. Now it took that group a long time to come to terms with that, but it shows that your local circumstances are predominant, because in Sheffield they have a fantastic transport and bus card system, etc. So people can get around. People met in the Waterstones, so they'd meet in the bookshop and have a cab, but they all went by bus and it was free. So some groups see it as an advantage not driving anymore. Yeah, I couldn't not drive because I live in the middle of nowhere as well, so it would be a big impact on me. So it's important that it's the local aspect that's very, very important, which is why it's so fantastic that everybody is here locally. And hopefully you can pick up on some of these discussion points which we'll leave upon the wall as the afternoon goes on. So how to talk to policymakers, people that hold purse strings, people that make decisions. From the group yesterday came, need to present clear, logical cases and keep calm. Yeah? Present a mature argument. Most people with dementia, that live with dementia, are mature, either in age or in behaviour, not all, but most. Yeah, and so people have expertise, people have professional backgrounds, lifelong experience, have run projects, have managed millions and millions of pounds, have run gardens, farms, businesses, held down jobs, been parents, grandparents. There's so much experience for people, for policymakers to listen to about life, not just about dementia. And if you work collectively, you can build up some pressure. Agnes and I, and Anna, on occasion, we go to the cross-party group at Hollywood and take part in the discussions there. It doesn't make policy, but it informs policy. It's a pressure group. There's an open invite to people living with dementia to join us at that group. And carers, absolutely, yes, sorry. Yeah, and you go as well, don't you? Yes, indeed, Amanda, sorry. And, but there's an open invite. The more of us, the merrier, because that will actually change the paradigm. That will shift the paradigm. Yeah, to have that voice of experience. It's unanswerable. So if a government minister is saying, "Oh, the self-directed support policy is fantastic, it's the best in Europe," and 5 people sit there and say, actually, yep, in Dumfries and Galloway, it's really difficult to get a penny or even get an appointment. In Aberdeen, it just doesn't exist. That experience informs the policymakers, because they can't then say this is working, because it's not. We know it's not working. Equally across the country. Some areas it's great, some areas it's different. So that's led to an idea of a review of all the SDS policies in Scotland and the way it's enacted locally. We need messages to the council. Here you go. Who's from the council? There you go. Here's bin back. We need better transport.
Oh, that's the man.
Sometimes it's not necessarily better transport, but it's more accessible transport. Transport we can use. A project that we've been involved in England, bringing routes together in South and West Yorkshire, actually tested some of the routes, and we fed back a meeting. Andy was there as well. We fed back this to the influencers, who actually decided on the evidence of the discussion and the feedback from the exploring these routes that they would make significant changes. Indeed, including colour coding all the different bus companies and the routes, a colour code for the route out and a code for the route back, personalised timetables that could be sent to people on their phones if they made regular journeys, taking the advertising off the bus stop timetables and replacing it with a map. Now I know that happens here. Somebody said it happens here. That's great. So it's not. There might be a bus every half an hour. But if people can't find out how to catch that bus, so it's a broad statement there. Listen to us. Public toilets. Anybody like to expand on that? Right, so a lot are closed, and that's a really big thing, isn't it? If you're running for a train and there isn't a train station in Haddington either, is there? So you'd run a long way for a train from Haddington. A bus users forum, keen to listen. We need to talk to councillors and explain the experience of dementia. And the government, whether that's local or national, has a responsibility for educating the public about dementia. Provide more marketing. Get the local press involved.
Is there anybody from the local press here?
No, they wanted to come, but they got to press if their business day.
Right.
So Robbie from the Courier says hello, and whatever we want to put in the Courier, we'd be delighted.
Fantastic. I'm going to finish off now. I think I'm just about on time. So, people increasingly within DEEP are saying that DEEP is actually a social movement and a network as well, because it's seeking to create change, positive change. And we were very fortunate to have Sajid and some ladies from an Asian women's group called Siwa at our Edinburgh gathering. Sajid is 94 years old and lives with dementia, and she brought with her her community, which was completely supportive around her. And they sang a song for her. But we were also told that in Sanskrit, deep means the light from the lamp of enlightenment. And that's what they thought they were coming to. Sort of. This is what they were coming to. So it worked for us. And so deep by serendipity, by pulling people together, creates positive narratives. And I think that's something that I've learned in the year and a half that I've been involved. It's a different way of doing things. It's from the inside out, and it's from the ground up. Yeah, in a way, it's like turning the world upside down and seeing what's happening underneath and learning from that. So thank you very much.